Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Before we get started, quick note, this conversation was pre-recorded, so you will hear us talking about upcoming events and book news that may have already taken place by the time you're listening. So today, I'm joined by author Joanna Jenkins, whose path to publication took an unexpected turn after a life-changing bike accident inspired her to step away from a successful 30-year career as a corporate lawyer and finally pursue her dream of becoming a novelist. In this episode, we chat about her latest novel, Bad Neighbours, which is set in Sydney's vibrant Potts Point, and explore how her legal background, real-life observations, and love of storytelling have shaped her writing. Joanna also shares the realities of getting published, overcoming rejection, building a readership, and what she's learned throughout her journey. So whether you're an aspiring writer, a fan of mysteries and thrillers, or someone thinking about taking a leap into a new chapter of life, this conversation is packed with inspiration and practical insights. So let's jump in and meet Joanna Jenkins. Hi, Joanna. How are you?
Hi, Lisa. I'm very well, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming, especially on your publication day. So really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me and to share your story and more about your book, which we'll step into a little bit later. But before we go into your story, I'd love for you just to share a little bit about yourself to the audience today.
So when people ask me what I do, I always say, well, I used to be a corporate lawyer, but now I'm a writer, even though being a writer is all that I ever wanted to be. But for more than 30 years, I was a solicitor and I ended up being a partner in a great big global law firm. I'd always wanted to be a writer, but had never kind of got around to it, got absorbed in a career. And then one day I was riding my bike along a country road and a guy named Freckle, who was driving a bottle green Land Cruiser, bumped me while I was on my bike. And there were various injuries, but I had a broken arm for a year. And it was during that year that I thought, if ever I'm going to bail and do something else and do the thing I've always wanted to do, now's probably the time. So unfortunately, you often hear about people having this sort of epiphany as a consequence of a life-changing event that's sometimes not that great, but that's me.
Brilliant. Wow. Let's dive into that a little bit more before we get into your book, because you mentioned you've had a corporate career, but you've always wanted to be a writer. So when did that kind of journey begin for you? When did you have that inkling that I love writing? Was that since you were in school or university?
It was before school. So I used to sit and pretend to read books, and my mother thought I was reading them, but then she realised they were upside down. Pretend to read books, and I'd make up a story with the book open. I must have been 4 or something. So I must have always liked stories and telling stories, and so and then I just spent my childhood reading, basically.
Yeah, amazing. And you mentioned obviously that, you were a solicitor, you were a partner in a global corporate law firm. What made you go down that pathway and not the writing side? Because you obviously studied and you got a degree in English Lit as well as law. Yeah. So what made you kind of choose that pathway and not the writing at that time?
Because I sort of thought I probably needed to get a real job and earn a living. And then you kind of, once you start doing that, you kind of get a little distracted by, head down a path. But I did have this strong sense that I needed to be independent and be able to support myself.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Did you continue writing like during your career, or was it kind of completely, you didn't do it until you had that accident?
No, I did write. I got busier and busier at work and it became more and more stressful. And so I kind of stopped doing creative writing. But as a lawyer, there's a lot of writing. Like I used to draft contracts, like they were door stoppers, these were all this contract. So there was a lot of writing, and that it's a lot of editing. Of course, it's not creative writing.
Yeah.
So it's a very particular type, but it was still sort of solving problems and working, getting the structure right. So there are a lot of similarities with that kind of writing and creative writing.
Yeah.
Funnily enough.
And then when you had your accident, we always say it's those moments in life where epiphany or not, or we just think, okay, if I'm not going to do it now, then I'm never going to do it. did you have a story in mind? Like, was it already there, or did you have to sit down and think about, okay, now I decided to do this, I've got to build out what I'm going to write?
No, so that was my first book, How to Kill a Client. It became How to Kill a Client. I had in my mind that I wanted to write a book about what it's actually like in big law, in those big law firms, because there are a lot of TV shows about it, and they're very glamorous, and people punching around in high heels and turning up on the last day of the trial with the winning thing that they just arrived at by accident the night before. And the people weren't real. And so I wanted to write a story about what it's actually like, how, the camaraderie, but also the stress, how the money distorts how people behave and can behave quite poorly. And in order to write that book, I was sort of conscious that the people I was writing it for, namely, people in law firms, firstly. I hoped I was writing it for everybody, but I had an idea that it was probably going to be initially read by people who worked in law firms. They're very busy, don't have a lot of time. And so I really wanted to have a plot to propel it forward. And then I sort of thought, oh, well, if there's an awful person, I'll just kill him. And then, and that can be the plot.
Brilliant. I love that. Pulling on your experience, did it make it a little bit easier to write in that genre because you understood that world and those kind of similarities?
Well, it made it, obviously I was able to write about the world. Funnily enough, in corporate law, there aren't that many murders.
No,
in fact,
funny enough.
As far as I'm aware, there are zero. So I'm sure there are some, but zero. So that side of it, and I didn't do any criminal law, so I never interacted with actual murderers at all, actually. I was going to say on a professional basis. As far as I'm aware, I've never met an actual murderer. So that side of it I had to make up. But the world was very real. In fact, as somebody said to me the other day, it's kind of like a documentary. When you're in the meetings, people are staring out the window and thinking their real thoughts about the other people in the meeting. Yeah, that's like a documentary.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so how long did it take you to complete that first draft of your novel?
I sort of dipped in and out of it. It took 5 years in total, but in terms of actual writing, I always said 12 months, but it's probably closer to 18 months now that I, have written other books. I can see how long it takes because I do a lot of drafts.
Yeah.
And for that book in particular, I reckon there would have been close to 100 drafts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was also teaching myself how to write. I didn't ever do a course. So I was teaching myself about plot and structure and characterization and what it means when they say show, don't tell. I didn't understand what that meant. So it was kind of, I was teaching myself how to write a book at the same time as I was writing one.
Yeah. And just touching on that, because a lot of the audience that listen today are, they're published authors traditionally or indie. There's also a lot of aspiring and emerging authors. So people who are really trying to have written several novels, but just haven't had that gate open yet to actually become published. So you mentioned there about upskilling yourself, but you didn't attend any courses. So
yeah, I was all
how did you
out.
do that?
Well, I just sat down and wrote, and then I'd get people to read it. Some very patient beta readers, and they'd read it and get some feedback, and then I'd have another crack. So yeah, there was, and just learning things like, the show don't tell thing was quite a revelation once I figured out what that meant. You kind of sitting in a room, sitting in the head behind the eyes of a character in the room and then working out what that room looks like rather than explaining what happened. You're just kind of experiencing what happens in real time, and it's their interpretation of what's happening around them.
Yeah, that's great advice, actually. What then made you decide to go out and try and get it published?
Well, that was always the objective. Yeah, I've actually thought about that a lot. I think we're very social creatures, humans, and I think we want to have some rapport, even with people we've never met. Like we want to have some affirmation of a world view. So I always wanted to be published. But then I got a lot of rejections, and after a while I thought, we're dealing with the injury to the self. I thought, well, what else would I be doing? And I thought, well, I like this so much, I'm not going to do anything else. I've just got to maybe suck it up and kind of accept that I might never be published. And then, funnily enough, that was, of course, the tipping point. And then 3 weeks later, I got a publishing contract. But it was a sort of acceptance that maybe I wouldn't, and dealing with the disappointment of that.
Yeah, and I haven't spoken. Maybe I've spoken to one author who got published straight away, but many that I've spoken to, it's taken them years, and they've had challenges and also a lot of knockbacks, but they're determined, and that's something that they wanted to become and do, so they've never given up. And I think it's a real learning curve, right? And in terms of what that now looks like for you, because obviously today's your publication day for Bad Neighbours, and we'll go into that shortly. Once you got that book deal, was it just a 1 book deal, 2 book deal? What did that look like for you?
It was a 1 book deal. And then I wrote the next book, which was The Bluff, submitted that, and Alan and Unwin accepted that. And then I've written another book in a different genre in between that's been rejected.
Yeah.
So, so the rejections still happen. And I actually know a lot of fiction writers who are writing in the same genre and get rejected. I just think it's such a tough industry for the publishers. Like, the margins are minuscule, and they do have to kind of take a bit of a gamble. And I think it's really hard for them as well as for the writer, especially in such a small market.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more debut authors come in, but it's timing as well. It's like to think about the voices that are already out there, and is your story unique, and will people pick up? Like, so it's a gamble for them as well, right?
Yeah, and also there's a lag, So you sign the contract, and with the first one, I signed the contract 18 months before it was published. So the publishers are guessing what people will be wanting to read in 18 months' time.
Yeah. And a lot can happen in 18 months' time.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly right. Yeah.
What, do you mind me asking what other genre you were writing in?
It was non-fiction history.
Okay. We keep doing that, do you reckon, or you kind of part?
Yeah, I've put a lot of work into it. So
yeah.
It's about an ancestor of mine, my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother, who was killed in a massacre.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite an astonishing story. And it turned out she was a convict, something my mother had never told me.
Wow. That is intriguing.
It turns out I come from a long line of thieves.
Oh, wow.
Judging by your accent, you probably don't come from a long line of thieves.
No,
I think a lot of people do. And it's been studiously hidden in, like the shame of that has been sort of covered over by layers. And then, so we're less ashamed of it now. And we go, oh my God. And I rang my mother and said, are we First Fleeters? And she said, oh, I suppose we are. She was horrified that I'd kind of uncovered this unsavory fact, but I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, what an intriguing story. I think because you've got that creative writing side as well, you're probably thinking like all the stories and the fascination behind it.
Yeah, and the characters. Yeah,
exactly. And now that you obviously, you're a published author, you've got your 3rd book. What have you learned since having that first novel released versus Bad Neighbours?
Well, I've learned, as I said before, publishing is really hard for everybody because it's a small market, a lot of books. So I get that the pressure. I've learned things like how many books you have to sell to be called a bestseller. Like, I've learned that How to Kill a Client was QBD, Queensland, the QBD, the bookshop, book of the month. And I went on this signing tour, and it came out at the same time as Spare, Harry. And so there was a wall of books of Harry with Harry's face on it. And right beside it, there was a wall of books in every bookshop of my book. And I thought, oh, wow. But it hadn't occurred to me that was actually, I was incredibly lucky for that,
Yeah.
for that to happen, so you kind of, you'll quickly normalize things like that.
Yeah.
And then realize later,
It was quite, it's
it's like getting a gold medal at the Olympics when you're 16.
You just don't realise, you probably don't know the extent of it, do you? Have you learned anything about how you write now? Do you have more kind of a formula behind it?
Yes, I have, but I thought it would get easier, but it doesn't. Like making up a story is actually like, I don't want to say it's hard because it's not like it's incredibly stressful or anything, but to pull the story out and get it to work, actually, it's as I said, it's not hard work. It's just absorbing work and getting it all to kind of line up and is tricky. And I suppose I have a bit more of an idea about what it should look like at the end and how, tricks for getting there, but it's still not easy to kind of construct it, like put all the jigsaw, have the jigsaw pieces and put them all together in a way that's intelligible. Yeah, and I know a bit more about the publishing industry and the camaraderie amongst writers.
Yeah. And you mentioned obviously pressure. Do you feel more pressure now than you did previously, having now had 3 books out?
Pressure as in to sell,
deliver.
Look, I worry about, the sales because, I think any book could be your last. So I do worry a bit, but in terms of pressure, I had a very stressful job. And so this feels like a luxury.
Yeah.
And it is really, I'm very fortunate to have this sort of second career. I do have moments of despond where I worry about how the book's going to go. But then also I think, got to wake up to myself a bit.
But you've got a following now, which is great. And I think when you're a debut, it's probably a bit daunting because you don't have that backing right now. But now you've got your 3rd book. Do you recognize, do you see familiar faces connecting with you or turning up to your
I
book
do on Instagram, but they all have funny names, so I don't, sometimes I don't connect them with a person. It is, a big writer is actually very isolating because really it's just you and the computer screen. Sometimes I have to make myself go out, and interact with the world. And when I do that, it's it can be lovely if I meet somebody who's like one of the books that's actually very life affirming.
Yeah.
But it is a very, it can be very, you kind of sit in your little cave and don't talk to anyone. That's why, I go on Instagram and try and, work out what's happening in the world. It's probably not a great perspective on, like you're not getting a fully rounded view of what the world is looking like.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, there's so many connections built through Instagram now, especially because that's how people connect, isn't it? And you can build some really strong relationships and communities and support groups that can enhance you not only as a reader but an author and vice versa. And you've got so many bookstagrammers now that promote.
I know, isn't it great?
Events.
It's so great.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, I don't know about you, but doing this podcast, it's opened me up to reading so many different genres, but also I am someone who likes to hear recommendations as well. So, if there's something that's going around or someone recommends, I'm like, oh, I'm intrigued. Okay. It's, may have not heard of that author before and, entice me to go to a bookstore and buy it. So I think having that community on social media is fantastic.
It is. It's wonderful. And, and I love the competitive photography of the book cover.
It's so true. And if you were to think back, what would you say has been your biggest challenge up until this point?
Getting the first book contract is hard.
Yeah.
Because you really have to kind of, I'm not sure there's any way of doing it other than just going in the slush pile,
Yeah.
I used to think, maybe if I knew someone who knew an agent, but I mean, that's a tricky thing to ask a writer to do and it's a tricky thing to ask the agent to do. So I think you just have to, write the most compelling pitch you can to sort of stand out in the slush pile.
Yeah. Yeah, it is competitive. And even so that you were saying about learning and upskilling yourself in how to write a novel. And then it's a whole other component of how do you write that query letter and how do you, position yourself
Yeah.
for an agent or a publisher.
Yeah.
That's another kind of thing in itself, right?
Yeah. And I was having no luck at all. And then a friend of mine, Angela Mollard, helped me with a pitch letter. That actually, a pitch email, the first line of it,
Yeah.
and that really made quite a big difference.
Yeah.
That was the thing that did it. So I
Yeah.
would say if you have your manuscript done and it says, you've redrafted it a few times, your beta readers love it, the one thing you can really focus on or should really focus on is that email pitch.
Yeah. Let's talk about your book, Bad Neighbours. And it's set in Potts Point. So I'm very intrigued because I used to live in Potts Point. And
Did you? Lucky
yeah.
you.
Yeah, I loved it. I lived there, I can't remember how many, a number of years ago now, but I lived there for probably 4 or 5 years. And yeah, just loved the area. What made you set your book in that location?
So my granny, when I was a child, because I actually live in Brisbane, but when I was a child, my grandmother lived in Wallara, which is kind of up the road, but it's a very different suburb to Potts Point, as anybody familiar with Sydney would know. But I wanted to write a book about inequality, wealth inequality. But I wanted, I always had it in my head that if ever I moved to Sydney, I'd move into Granny's apartment, her Granny's flat, as we used to call it. And so I just moved because she lived in this Art Deco apartment. And so apartment building. So I just moved it down the hill to Potts Point. And then you have all of the issues with the gentrification. If it's not far from the cross,
Yes.
you have all the issues with the gentrification and, the homelessness. And so you have very, very poor people completely down and out and down on their luck. And then you have quite wealthy people, and you can have them all in the same building or in the same footprint, which is kind of what I wanted the book to be about.
Yeah, it is actually really crazy you say that because I can remember, if I got off the train at King's Cross and I'd walk down and you turn the corner, and as soon as you turn the corner, it's like someone's put a completely different barrier up and you step into a whole new world.
Yes.
And I've never seen it like that before anywhere. That you can just, it's just crazy. And so I can completely appreciate how you've captured that. And
and then there would be people. Well, there's someone who is an aging rock star who has lived there, from being a starlet through a drug habit. So she managed to acquire the apartment from her agent, and so she's lived through the ages of the cross when it was, and now she lives in an apartment where the body corporate fees are debilitating. Like she really struggles to stay there, but it's her home. And then there's a guy who used to live there who's actually ended up being homeless and is living in a garden shed, or the lean-to, which constitutes the garden shed.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to capture the whole strata of society all in one building.
Would you say the story came first over the location, or the location came first, then the story?
Well, the concept came first, and then I wanted a location, and Potts Point was perfect for it.
Yeah.
So it suited what I wanted to write about.
Yeah. And your character development, how do they get born? Like, do they come to you instantly, or is it something that you have to map out?
They don't come to me instantly. I am working my way through members of my family. So I have had the people who are dead, like who have partners, so they can't sue me for defamation. And also can't be offended if I kind of overdo some of their characteristics a bit.
Yeah.
So I do. So there's always a member of my family in my books. I have the core character, so Ruth Dawson has been in all 3 books.
Yeah.
And then, her work is very important to her. So that's always a part of the story. And then her interaction with people who she encounters, it's kind of led by her in a way, because, she interacts with people and then they build up their own sort of personality after they've knocked around in rooms with people and been in conversations. I
Yeah.
think, as you probably have guessed, I'm a pantser, not a plotter.
Yes.
And that I do think it probably takes me a very long time much longer to write a book. I do wish I could plot it out more carefully. But every time I try it, I think I have a character and I put the character in a room with another character, and then they just kind of take over and go in a completely different direction. So,
Yeah. And that's the uniqueness. I think sometimes that's just your creativity flowing and you're open to kind of going down different avenues. Yeah, I've had a real mixture of people who say they just write it and then they'll edit it later, pull scenes out to be like, hey, that doesn't work there. And I don't know what I was thinking, writing that, and then maybe adding some in later. So I think it just whatever suits you and how.
Yeah, I have to discard a lot.
Yeah.
Because the plot kind of develops. And I've always changed the perpetrator, and sometimes the victim changes during the course of writing, partly because if I have in mind the person who did it, like the perpetrator at the beginning of the book, it's very hard to put in clues implicating the others, which means you don't have any sort of twists. And so I have to, the editor says, no, too obvious. And so I have to change it while keeping the sort of core idea about the story.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of books in this genre, but I also watch a lot. And I think after a while, I'm someone who just constantly guesses, or I'm like picking out pieces to be like, oh, they said that. Okay, hold on, is there a link? So, I imagine for you writing it, it's quite hard to take a step back and be like, okay, if I wasn't writing this and I was reading it, would I guess that that's, that's the person? It's quite hard.
Yeah, and that's almost impossible, actually. So you really do need to have other people, beta readers, but also editors come in and say, it looks like you've been heading towards that rock the whole way. See it coming.
And what have you loved most about writing this novel, Bad Neighbours?
Look, I really enjoyed the walking tours, Potts Point, with my friend, the retired architect. It was really quite wonderful. Going down the walkways and up the stairs and looking at all the trees.
So many hidden spots there.
I do actually build up a rapport with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like having a whole house full of made up friends, and I do quite like that. And sometimes I wonder if that's I become so absorbed with them and they become so real. I do wonder if that's part of the reason why I'm quite happy to stay at home with them, just kind of hang out with them.
They become a part of you, and
and they're very distinctive people.
Yeah.
So I did enjoy that. And they're also, they're quite funny. Like, this book is probably funnier than The Bluff, which was a bit, had dealt with some, like, deals with wealth inequality, but the Bluff dealt with some other issues that were a bit sort of confronting.
Yeah. What about the most challenging part of writing this book?
Look, getting the pacing is always hard. In a thriller, in the sort of in the technical sense of the word, which means that you're following, instead of a detective coming in and solving a crime that happens at the beginning, you have the build up to the crime. The crime happens in the middle, and then you kind of work out who did it. So in that structure, there's a bit of a tension between building up the plot and the characters before the action, the murder happens, and you have to balance that with not putting too much and having people, think it's too slow before it starts to speed up. And so, in fact, with this one, even after the arc was done, so I think I cut 5,000 words out of the first half of the book and then added more in at the end. So it's a difference of maybe 3,500 words, but I just cut an entire scene, which even after the arc copy was done. So if you've got an arc, you should abandon it and read the actual.
They sent it to me not so long ago, and so I don't know whether it's an up-to-date one or
it would say advanced reader copy.
No,
if it's got that on if the back look, oh, can you see that? If the Yeah.
That's my back. That's my
Yeah,
back.
yeah. No, that's all right. Read that. That's the one to read.
I was going to say they must have, because I know you're like, sometimes I get art copies and they don't even have like the full cover yet. And other times it's got like splashed on it art. So I'm glad I got the right one, but the updated version.
Yeah. So that I find that is really hard, getting that balance between getting the characters fully developed and the setup done
Yeah.
before the pace starts to really pick up after the person has the main victim has died.
Was there anything crazy that you had to Google or research in depth for this? Or was it all kind of from memory or just made up?
I use Google Maps a lot, and I'm Googling all the time, actually. There'll be something very simple like what's in a martini or,
yes.
like, because readers are very, like, they'll pick up things that you.
Yes, you've got to cross check.
Put it on Goodreads. Yeah, so I Google all the time. Yeah, fact checking.
Yeah, fact check. Yeah, because I'm sure if there was, that you got one single ingredient incorrect, they would be shouting about it. So I know
there is one. There's a tech bro who lives in a basement flat. So there's the aging rock star, and then there's a tech bro. It's kind of like having Elon Musk in the basement, and when he was younger, and he spent all his money on this incredibly flash car, and so I had to Google the car to work out what it's an EV. So and the EVs are kind of cars that go really fast, but they're designed by teenage boys or people with the brain of a teenage boy, and so they'll have things like a fart button in them. The Tesla has a fart button.
That's so I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, I had to kind of do a lot of Googling to work out what would be in this car that would make it really attractive for someone like him.
That's intriguing. I bet you start getting ads sent to you all the time about these cars.
About these incredibly glamorous cars.
Yeah. That's actually made me laugh, some of those things. Things that you never think about, right? I suppose until you start Googling and researching, and you probably, oh, wow, I've learned something new today.
That's true.
Do you have a favourite character if you had to think about like personality traits or just their persona? Is there a favourite character that you have from this book?
I do like the aging rock star. I'm very fond of her. I quite like the tech bro. In fact, I like them all, really. And then there's up in the penthouse, there's a person who's very, she's married to a banker, and she's she's an influencer on Instagram, an influencer, and she's really into handbags. Something like expensive handbags. I can kind of understand that they're very attractive, those handbags, but I would not spend $50,000 on one.
No.
That just seems to me to be absurd. And so there's her.
Okay.
Yeah. As I said, I become very, very kind of fond of them, of this kind of vast array of people, which you could only really have in somewhere like Potts Point, where you have like this great big melting pot of different people from all kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah, I love that, and it makes it unique, right? And you get to explore and understand the different characters and
how they got there.
Yeah,
because we have this idea in Australia that you get a job and then you get a mortgage and then. But the reality is that people come across, have their properties for a whole lot of different reasons. A major one, of course, is inheritance.
Yes.
Either they inherit the money for it or they inherit the actual property. So there's a lot of luck involved in the acquisition of wealth.
Yeah, I think if you can inherit a property nowadays, you're winning, because getting a mortgage, the prices of houses,
it's ridiculous. And if you're a baby boomer, you're just incredibly lucky that you bought a house for some piddling amount 50 years ago, and now you're sitting on millions of dollars, but that just can't happen for young people now. So it's kind of a bit about that, a bit about sort of questioning this myth we tell ourselves about how you acquire a place to live, and also what it means to have a place to live, what home means.
Well, I love that side of it. So your book's out now. You've got a number
Today?
of events. So you've got your first event this Friday, correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
well, actually, I had the first event. I did a Sisters in Crime event in Melbourne, not last Friday, the Friday before. That was great fun. That was with Rebecca Lim and Eve Thompson, 2 lawyers, and so it was called Law and Disorder. It was a great concept for a
brilliant
panel. It was great. So that was the first event, and then
Are you going to all major cities, or are you just focusing
I'm going
on?
to Canberra.
Okay, yeah,
So I've been to Melbourne, going to Canberra,
yeah.
and that's it at
Be
the moment.
cold.
Hey?
Be cold in Canberra.
It'll be cold, yes.
Especially compared to Brisbane. But it's nice that you get to do some tours and get to meet people and showcase.
Yeah. The Sisters in Crime thing was a hoot.
Oh,
It was
good.
at a pub in South Melbourne. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. And then it gets you out and about, right? Like you said, rather than you just being immersed in your writing, you can actually celebrate your book and talk about it and meet like-minded people.
Yeah.
And then, Joanna, you've got a website, correct? Where can people find you?
So it's joannajenkins.net. And I'm on Instagram. I think it's joanna.jenkins.writer or something like that.
Okay.
And I think, and I'm also on Facebook with you.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I've absolutely loved chatting to you. I'm excited to jump into Bad Neighbours. And I've already seen a lot of people posting about it. So I know it's going to have some great reviews. So I'm wishing you all the best and wishing you lots of happiness and in celebrations.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Novel. What a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome.